All right, when users register, we want to verify their email addresses. And the way we do this is by sending an email to them with a link. And once they click on that email, we take them to a front-end application to actually verify that email address. And if we look at the database here under the users, we have a field called email verified at. By default, it is set to null, which means that this user has not verified their email. And we are not doing anything with this at the moment because we haven't implemented the functionality for Laravel to check that an email is verified. And that's what we're going to be doing now. So if we go back to our user model here, you see that it does come with a class import called must verify email. And for now, by default, that is commented out, which means we are not implementing the email verification. But if we uncomment that, and here in our class declaration, we simply say it implements must verify email, then we have actually activated the functionality for a user to be verified before they can proceed to access other things in the system. And this implementation does come with other functionality. This interface does have other functionalities and methods that are added to the user model. For instance, it has a method called hasVerifiedEmail, which we basically use to check if the user has verified their email. And that is simply done by checking to see if the email verified at field is null or not. It also has the method to mark the email as verified or to send a verification email notification to the user or to get the email for verification. So by implementing that interface, all those methods are already or become part of the user model. What we are going to do here is create a controller that we use to handle all the user verification. Here we are just going to do PHP artisan, make controller, and that will be in the auth. I'm just going to call this email verification controller. And in that controller, we are going to define the methods required to verify the email. And there are going to be two methods. The first one is a method to send a link to the user to verify their email account. So public function send verification email request takes a request object. And the second method will be the method to actually verify the user when they click on the link that we send them by email. So public function verify is what I'm going to call this. It also takes a request object, and we will implement actually verifying the email address here. So let's start with sending the email verification. When we registered the user, we did say that in the action, we broadcast an event called new registered. Because we have activated a must verify email contract on the user model, what will happen is when the user is registered, Laravel will listen for this event and it will automatically send an email to the user telling them they need to verify their email accounts. And so we can actually test that by setting up a local email server, registering the user, and to see if that email gets sent. And to send the mail server or to do the mail server here, by default, Laravel comes with something called MailPit, which is a really nice, easy package for us to use to simulate local mail servers. And this is used for development. You cannot use it for production, but it does send emails out on the local server. In the past, we used to have something called Mailhawk. So MailPit is actually an extension of Mailhawk, but it's designed to be way faster than Mailhawk. So by default, Laravel comes with MailPit. So if you come here, you need to install MailPit on your local system for it to work. Now, the installation instructions are here for both Windows and Mac. And if you want to run it in a Docker container, feel free. But I already installed that using brew. So here we just do brew tap and then brew install MailPit. And that installs MailPit on my system. So I ask you to just go to this repository and have that MailPit installed. Of course, if you prefer to use another mail driver, feel free to do that. I'm going to change the host here to 0.0.0.0, which is where my mailpit is running locally. And to run mailpit, I'll just go and create a new terminal. And I'll just say mailpit because I have installed it. If I just say mailpit, it spins up the SMTP server, a local SMTP server on that URL, which if you see here, it matches. It says it's running on host 000 port 1025, which is what we have here. The host is 000 and the port is 1025. And then I'll just customize my email here to say no reply at skillmedia.com. Again, this is locally and we don't care about what we provide in there. If we go to this link, you see a nice little interface, minimal, but it does work. And this is where you would see all the emails that you're sending from your local development. So let's go back to Laravel here. And I'm just going to rename this so I know what's happening. I'm just going to say mailpit. And over in PHP here, I'm going to do a fresh migration. So PA, let's register the user again from fresh to be sure that Laravel is sending through the email address based on the user registration action and that it is listening for the registered event. So let's go back to Postman, and under register, we can go here and we quickly send another request. And now we do see a link here that says the verification verify link does not exist, which is true because what Laravel does is when it's trying to send the email to the user, it looks for this route, and based on this route, it generates the link that the user will have to click to verify their email address. So we need to implement or we need to create that route and make it available for the users. So over in the routes PHP file, I'm going to quickly go to API, and we will ask that before users can verify their emails, they should be logged in. So because we have two methods in that controller, let's introduce ourselves to what Laravel calls a controller route, which means you can bundle all your routes that belong to the same controller in a single route group, and Laravel will just pick it up. So here we want to look at the email verification controller class, and we'll wrap that in a group. And in that route, we did have two methods. We have the post method, which is the link we use to resend the verification email to the user. So I'm going to call that email verification notification. And we are calling the send verification email method. And in this case, I'd want to create what we call the throttle middleware, which we'll look at when we actually start implementing it in the front end, because we want to minimize how many requests a user can send to this endpoint within a certain period of time. So let's say that it can only send a maximum of 6 requests in every 1 minute, okay? So just think of it as a front-end form, and this will become clearer when we start implementing it next. Just think of this as the form that you have in the front end. To ask a user to resend the link, they'll have to enter their email, click on send, and we have to email them with a new link. But we don't want malicious users to just keep clicking so many times, and we have no way of checking. So we have a bunch of emails being sent from the backend. We want to limit it so that users can only make a maximum of 6 requests in every single minute. So that is the first route that we want, to resend the verification email. The next route is to actually verify the user, okay? And we're just going to make that a get route. And I'm just going to call this verify email. And in that route, we are going to receive the user who is being verified. And we are going to pass a hash to that verification, which we will use to identify who the user is. And then we are calling the verify method in the controller. And in here, I just want to give a name to that route, which is verification.verify. Now, if you remember correctly, when we tried to send this request before, the error we got from Laravel was that we didn't have a verify route. So it's important that you name this route as verification verify, which will allow Laravel to send the email based on this route. So Laravel will generate the email based on this route. Now, we don't have anything happening in here yet, but all we want to do is make sure that Laravel is sending through the email with the correct information. And again, if we go back, I did make a mistake here. It should be middleware. So in fact, let's change this to ID, because by default, Laravel is looking for the ID of the user, and that's what it calls a parameter. And so let's change that to ID. And over here, we are not implementing anything yet. So this should be enough to register a user and receive an email for authentication. So let's go here and refresh our migrations, which means we're clearing the database. And over in Postman, we'll try and send the request again to register the user. And now the user is registered. We have the information in the front end. And if everything works well, we should have received an email which says verify email address. If we click on that, we have the link to verify the user email. Of course, this link it wouldn't do anything at the moment because we haven't implemented anything, but it contains the information that we need. It contains the user ID, it contains the hash, and we can use this to verify the email address. So in the next lesson, we are going to look at customizing this route, because at the moment, if you look at this link, it's pointing to the API as the base URL, but we don't want users going to the API. At the end of the day, we want them to go to the client side where that information will be received and sent to this API endpoint. So we are going to look at customizing this email and generating a link that actually contains the client side URL and not the server side.